Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Burn Your Draft, the podcast exploring the Reed College senior thesis process. I'm Ace Lackey, your podcast producer. This episode features one of my in-person interviews, this time with Caleb Stanco, talking about the novel Blood Meridian and how we use fiction to deal with the reality of violence.
My name is Caleb Stanco. I was an English major. My thesis advisor was Michael Faletra, and the title of my thesis was American Theodicy, Blood Meridian, and the Problem of Violence.
So what is your thesis about, sort of back of the book blurb?
Well, I think there's two clear answers. Obviously, it's about Blood Meridian, the novel by McCarthy. It's in 1985. It's a Western novel about a real-life occurrence, a gang in the American Southwest and northern Mexico, a bit before the American Civil War, but right after the Mexican-American War. So it's about that book, but what it sort of thematically is about violence and trying to understand violence in the way it's represented in the literature especially, but obviously in Blood Meridian in particular, and about how the book, or what the book says about violence and what it might say about how we should respond to it as readers and as people in the world. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Why did you choose to write about this for your major?
So I had been introduced to the book, I think, in my sophomore or freshman year, independently from any class. My older brother suggested it to me, and I read it. I've read it, I think 3 or 4 times at this point, and I always seem to end up reading it on the plane. And I think I forgot to mention I'm from upstate New York. So I would, take red-eye flights back home all the way to the East Coast, and I can't sleep on planes very well. So I would just read. I would end up reading the book, and I read it over and over again, trying to grasp it, trying to understand it. So really, it really grabbed me because I didn't understand it when I read through it once, when I read through it twice. So I said, I want to understand this book. I want to sit with this book for a year and work on it. But the second thing is more of an academic interest, which is I have a minor in religion, and the book is very heavily religiously inflected, and I thought it'd be a perfect book to align my interests in both English and religion as academic study.
What kind of focus on religion does the book have? Is it like American Christianity?
Yeah, the book engages with a lot of Christian themes and symbols, and part of my argument is I think it has, my interpretation is that it has somewhat of a Christian message to it. It's very, a little bit twisted, and McCarthy really makes it its own, but I think it's full of allusions to stories in the Bible, but it's also not just American Christianity, but also about the interaction between Mexican Catholicism and American Protestantism, but that's more wrapped up into its cultural explanation of the borderlands and the interaction between Hispanic and Anglo culture in American history.
What was your process working on the thesis? What skills did you end up gaining or strengthening as you worked on it?
Definitely research. Definitely researching, especially secondary articles, but also various theorists and philosophers and thinkers on my own, and obviously connecting those with my own thoughts and together. That was a huge part of my thesis, was connecting disparate thinkers who oftentimes don't agree and finding out ways in which they do agree and really an overlap and contribute to my argument. But also the really essential skill of being able to assess other scholars' arguments and critique them in a really interesting way. So, in the past, yes, I learned how to summarize and annotate articles and books and narratives. It's a part of just, being an English major in my classes before. But this was the first time I really got to engage and criticize scholars who probably know a lot more than me, but I had more of a leeway to do that in the thesis, more space to do that in my thesis. I didn't refute, but I argued very strongly against a particular thread of interpretation on Blood Meridian that's kind of uses Gnostic Christianity. In my third chapter, I disagree with it heavily, and I point out that it doesn't, at least for what I was trying to do, it doesn't work for my argument.
What did the average day of working on the thesis look like? Was it mainly a lot of like sitting in the library writing?
Yeah, it was a lot. I probably spent too much time in the library, my thesis desk. But it was really kind of a week-to-week thing where I would research like for a week and then write for a week, turn around and start writing and putting an argument from all that research, all that reading. So I would either be reading and editing or writing or like outlining. Like I did obviously a lot of planning for each chapter. But yeah, I spent too much time in the library. I had a very visible thesis desk. It was like near the bathroom in the downstairs.
Oh.
And I would have people people would walk by to get their own thesis desk or go to the bathroom. And I had several people either in the library or outside of the library come up to me and ask me about my thesis because I was there all the time, just like working and had all these books about Cormac McCarthy and like violence and religion and stuff like that. So that it interested people. Yeah.
What advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of this project based off of what you know now?
I think, as I just mentioned, I would say try to work on your thesis outside of the library a little bit more. Try to get together with your friends and work on your thesis more. Like my best friend was my thesis desk partner, and that was great. We didn't see each other all the time as much as other people because we had sort of different work schedules. But near the end, me and my friends got together and like did more, not working together on each other's thesis, but working alongside each other, asking each other to like read a passage, see if it made sense, that sort of thing. I think that was really nice. And I would also say to myself, you can't write about everything, and it's okay not to. You can't read everything about McCarthy or Blood Meridian. That's okay. Just go forward. Trust yourself that you will end up where you need to be. Work a little bit every day, and you'll get through it.
So what was the eventual outcome of the project? Kind of how is the thesis laid out? How is that outcome different from what you expected the thesis would be at the beginning?
Well, the first thing is that it was a really long thesis. It was longer than I thought it would be. Longer than I expected. I wrote a lot more words than I thought I did. But I'll say when I started, I didn't know. I knew the general direction of where I was going. I knew I'd be talking about religion and Christianity in the book. But in the process of writing it, I ended up talking about thinkers that I didn't think I would. Like I knew I would be talking about Bataille and René Girard for a long time, but I didn't know I'd be talking about Simone Weil, or in my third chapter I turned to ancient philosophers. I turned to Boethius and Augustine and Irenaeus, which I totally didn't expect to do. And so in English, in terms of like, what was it like writing it? In the English department, we have our first chapter due at the end of the rough draft of our first chapter due at the end of the fall semester. And I got that done. And that was pretty much how I expected it to be. It was very much like kind of getting my house in order about like breaking down the style of the text, doing a lot of the same stuff I had done in English classes that we learned in English classes, which is, analyzing language, analyzing style, breaking it apart, kind of defining characters, defining story arcs, narratives, that sort of thing. Then the second and third chapters, which I wrote, obviously in the spring semester, really was really where my argument took off for myself, and I started, like that second chapter, like I mentioned, I bring Bataille and Girard together and Simone Weil, and it kind of got, as I said, it kind of got out of hand pretty quickly, but not out of hand in the sense of, I lost control of what was happening. It just kind of almost like a tree. I just started, the more I read, the more I was able to connect things together. So it was kind of a mad dash in the second semester to like write all that stuff, but I feel like I had prepared a lot. I'd spent a lot of time reading and researching in the first semester, and I was like prepped to do all that writing for the second one.
Why is this thesis important? Who will this impact, or what's something new and surprising that you found out in the process of writing it?
Well, I think it's sort of unfortunate, actually, that my thesis feels very relevant because it's about violence. And I think now especially, more than, I haven't lived very long, but now especially feels at a particularly violent time in like contemporary world events. But also violence is, I think, a perennial issue. And that's a huge claim that I make, that I think Blood Meridian is making, is that Blood Meridian is saying that violence is a perennial issue or problem with human society. But a huge part of the conclusion that I think surprised me a little bit was that Blood Meridian feels like such a bleak book when you first read it. It feels like the violence is all-pervading and oppressive and inescapable, kind of like the character, the judge in the text, is sort of this, almost this avatar of violence. And he feels inescapable when you read it, the sense of dread. And I didn't expect to end up with as hopeful of a conclusion that I did about violence and what we can do, or at least what Blood Meridian says about violence, which is basically, and again, this surprised me. I didn't know what to think about the book when I started working on my thesis. I truly didn't. Basically, what I came up with is that Blood Meridian is so graphic, it's so insistent on showing us what violence does and is because it wants us to seriously think about it. It doesn't want us to put it out of mind. It doesn't want us to say violence is not human. It wants us to admit that violence is a very human thing, and therefore it is something we can control and that we do have a response to. And basically, as far as I understood it, Blood Meridian was about, obviously the first step is always recognizing violence and confronting it, but also understanding that violence is about the destruction of humanity. It's about the absence of meaning and of being, so the destruction of, violence means what is human is no longer human. It transforms us into objects. And that a way to resist that, at least as I argue, a way to resist that is by doing the work that Blood Meridian wants us to do as readers, which is make meaning, not out of violence, but in spite of violence and in the midst of it, like make meaning out of our response to it. So it's kind of sounds very grand claim, but that's generally what I think Blood Meridian as a novel is pointing towards. And I don't know how much I personally agree with that. I'm still really struggling with that, whether I fully agree with what I think Blood Meridian is saying. But I think it's a really important perspective that we don't have. Like, we have all of these discussions of violence, but to me, they feel like they aren't actually discussing it. I think this goes back to why I wanted to do the thesis in the first place, which is Blood Meridian was the first book that really confronted me with violence that I'd ever read. It wasn't just a backdrop or an inciting incident. It was the subject of the book to me. And that was really unique because I had not encountered really much of a piece of media before. I'm sure there are plenty of those out there. And actually in my second chapter, I turned to Simone Weil, and Simone Weil talks about the Iliad, and her interpretation of the Iliad is actually about violence and what it does. But I felt like in modern discourse, we sort of have lost a certain language to talk about violence, or maybe we didn't have it to begin with, but we feel sort of so, at least I have always felt so almost paralyzed when talking about violence. Like I just didn't know what it actually was. Like it's sort of this thing we all accept, that we know it when we see it, obviously, but at least for me, I had never really confronted what violence was and how to actually respond to it besides saying it's bad, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of taught that it's something that should be avoided at all costs, that people shouldn't have to confront it at all. Yeah, and ideally, I think in an ideal world, yes, it wouldn't exist, but it does, and I think we take it too literally. Like, it is good advice, but also we take it too literally and we end up, and it ends up becoming unmentionable or unconfrontable, which it is not. And I think that is what actually gives it power, especially when we don't use text and fiction and literature and art to talk about something. Like, if we can't talk about violence in art and in literature and in culture, how can we even begin talking about it in our real lives? And therefore start to try to figure out how to deal with it effectively. How do you think your thesis experience will inform your life after Read?
I think it would inform it a lot because it really helped me figure out what I wanted to keep doing in the future. It was a real kind of trial run for me because I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to graduate school. And doing my thesis really helped me decide to do that, which was a hard decision, as I think it is for everybody, but especially now, like the current state of academia, especially in the United States, is really kind of chaotic, and nobody knows what the future is going to be in that. But it helped me decide that, no, this is what I find fulfilling. This is what I find, what I can contribute to the world. But speaking less grandly, it also helped me really decide that I wanted to study religion and literature in graduate school. It also helped me form a better picture of McCarthy as an author. That's a big thing, is that McCarthy has sort of this great author kind of syndrome around him, even though he's fairly contemporary. I mean, he only died sort of recently, but already there's a whole Cormac McCarthy society around him, and they do a lot of great work, and a lot of my sources were directly from them, from these McCarthy scholars. But it's a big pitfall that we can fall into in kind of saying, oh, this is a great piece of literature, this is a great novel, this is a great author, and we forget that the point of the great literature is that it can be critiqued and that it should be analyzed and sort of broken apart a little bit, which is what I tried to do, is really look at it critically and look at him as an author critically a little bit, though my focus was not on him as an author at all. I still had to do a lot of research about him.
Are you going to be going to grad school this fall, or are you kind of in the process of applying, looking for somewhere to go?
I'm in the process of applying right now. This is because on the advice of my professors in English, generally, again, this is the advice that I got. I'm obviously no expert, but in the humanities, it's perhaps recommended to take a gap year before going right to graduate school. And I know I'm glad I made that decision all the way a year ago to not apply, because I would not have wanted to go to graduate school right now. To go from doing my thesis and doing senior year right to graduate school, I needed a break from school for a little bit, because I've been in school since kindergarten, right? My whole life. And it also gives me time to read what I want to read and pursue other things and just relax a little bit before going back into it. So I'm hopeful. I don't obviously I don't know yet where I'm gonna end at, but yeah, I think I'll end up. You end up where you're going to end up, and all you can do is just go for it. Trust your gut and go for it.
Exactly.
That's what I tried to do.
In 30 years, what will go through your mind when you read through your thesis?
I think it'll mostly evoke my general time at Reed. I think it's sort of cliche, but it did really feel like kind of the culmination of my time at Reed, at least academically speaking, but also I think socially. I talked about my thesis, with my other senior friends all the time. We talked about our theses with each other. I was super excited to hear about their theses. I got 2 of my friends to read it because I just wouldn't shut up about the book enough. They read it. Yeah, it really represents kind of senior year to me even now. So I hope it'll bring back probably some stressful memories, but also I think a lot of good memories. And I know for sure, and I hope that I will have a lot of critiques of it in 30 years. But I hope in the end I will still be proud of it as a piece of literature or a piece of scholarship that can stand on its own.
What advice do you have for any listeners who are either starting Reed or starting their own senior thesis?
I'm going to do the senior thesis one first. I think my main point of advice is you're not going to have it all figured out immediately. Don't give into the imposter syndrome about feeling like you're not capable of doing the work. You completely are. Trust yourself. Trust kind of the process. Again, take it week by week, take it day by day, and you'll be very surprised, like I did, where you'll end up. And that's embrace that. Embrace the fact that you don't know. And then I think a piece of advice for people starting Reed, I think the main thing is finding a balance between your social life and your academic life. And I know that's kind of cliche and it's not much of an advice, but it is really important. It took me a while to feel at home at Reed. It took really until my sophomore year to really make the connections I needed to. So if you're starting, don't feel like you have to have it figured out. Don't feel like you have to know what your major is going to be or who you're going to be friends with. Like, those things will probably change. And that's what is great about Reed, I think, is that it gives you space to change and to challenge yourself. So embrace that, embrace discomfort. And again, just like trust yourself in that. Trust yourself in the discomfort.
We're almost to the end here with the last and possibly, some would say, most essential question. Is there anybody that you want to thank or acknowledge for helping you in the thesis process in any way?
Yeah, a lot of people. As I mentioned, my older brother, Simon, this thesis obviously would not have happened if he hadn't told me about Blood Meridian and given me his copy of the book. And he also helped me out. He suggested looking at Georges Bataille and René Girard, which formed such a huge part of my thesis. So I'm eternally grateful to him. And of course, I'm very grateful to my thesis advisor, Michael Fletcher. He was just wonderful to work with. His classes are already very popular, but I can't recommend his classes enough. They're so fun. You know, the Canterbury Tales are hilarious. Definitely take that class. And I also want to thank, in the religion department, Michael Fote and Christian Schiebel, particularly, because they helped me a lot in writing the thesis. They were sort of working pro bono a couple of times on my thesis. And then, I don't want to name names because I don't want to leave people out, but all my friends at Reed, truly I wouldn't have gotten through senior year without them. And they know who they are, and I hope they know how much I appreciate them. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much for talking with me today, Caleb.
Oh, thank you.
And congrats. I hope that you find success in your grad school applications.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine going through a second round of college applications.
Yeah. They're a little bit different, but like I said, you will end up where you end up. That's what I try to tell myself every day. Right.
And it'll be fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you one more time, Caleb. I hope things are going well wherever you ended up. If you, listener, enjoyed today's interview, I hope you'll join us again to hear from more students and alumni about what it means to burn your draft. Be sure to subscribe, check out our X, Facebook, and Instagram pages, and write a review on Apple Podcasts. Burn Your Draft is a production of Reed College and the Center for Life Beyond Reed. Created jointly by students, alumni, and staff, this episode was produced and engineered by me, Reed College student Ace Lackey. Our executive producer is Seth Paskin, class of 1990, with technical advising from Joe Janiga. Our project manager is Nate Martin, staff member and class of 2016. Music by Jack Salvucci, class of 2020, and podcast art by alumni Henry Gottschlich and Lillianne Pham. This podcast was made possible by a gift from Seth Paskin.